The sound was like a thunderclap. A single, bone-rattling crash that shattered the silence of the small, dimly lit apartment at the edge of town. For a split second, Claire Morgan thought she was dreaming. The clock on her nightstand glowed 2:03 a.m., its light trembling as the echo of splintering wood faded into a low, malicious laugh. Her heart froze. Someone had just kicked in her door. Claire had always been the quiet one on the block, polite, reserved, never causing trouble. She worked from home, rarely spoke to neighbors, and always kept her blinds drawn. To most, she was just the woman in 3B, forgettable, harmless, invisible. But to a group of drunk young men who lived in the same building, that made her an easy target. It started with small things, laughter in the hallway when she passed, footsteps outside her door late at night, a few cruel notes slipped under her mat. Claire ignored it all. She'd dealt with far worse in her life and refused to feed their childish games. But that night, the laughter turned into a plan. "Kick it in, bro." "She won't do anything," one of them whispered, giggling as the wood cracked. Claire's mind raced as she slipped out of bed. She didn't panic, not anymore. She'd been trained for situations far worse than this. She moved like a shadow to the closet, where a dark jacket hung neatly beside a black duffel bag. By the time the bullies stumbled inside, reeking of cheap alcohol and bad decisions, the apartment was nearly pitch black. "Yo, where is she?" one slurred, shining his phone's flashlight around. "Hey, lady. You awake?" The beam swept across the small living room, past the modest couch and the framed photo of her late husband on the wall. Then it landed on something draped over a chair, dark fabric with bold yellow letters across the back. FBI. The laughter died instantly. One of them blinked, squinting. "Dude, is that real?" Before anyone could answer, a voice cut through the dark. "Calm. Cold. Controlled. Hands where I can see them." Claire stepped into the weak light, her face pale but steady, a firearm held low but ready. She wasn't pointing it, not yet, but her stance left no room for misinterpretation. "You have 3 seconds to explain why my door is broken." The boys stammered, their earlier bravado evaporating. "We thought, we were just joking, we didn't mean." Claire took a step closer, her voice still even. "You think it's funny to terrorize someone? You think breaking into a woman's home is a game?" The tallest one, suddenly sober, shook his head. "Ma'am, we're sorry. We didn't know." "Didn't know what?" she asked sharply. "That I might fight back. That I might not be the easy victim you assumed." Her eyes flicked to the jacket. The same one she hadn't worn since leaving the bureau 2 years ago, after losing her husband in the line of duty. She'd quit the FBI, moved to a small town, and tried to start over, but the discipline, the instincts, the steel inside her had never left. Now, staring at these terrified young men, she realized something. This wasn't just about fear. It was about the power of perception, and how wrong people could be. Within minutes, the police were on their way. Claire hadn't needed to call them, the noise had woken her elderly neighbor, who'd already reported the break-in. When the officers arrived, they found 3 trembling young men on their knees, hands behind their heads, and a calm woman giving a detailed statement. The officers knew her name. They always did. Claire Morgan, former FBI agent, decorated for bravery, retired after her husband's death during an undercover operation. When the officer asked if she wanted to press charges, Claire paused. "Yes," she said quietly. Then after a moment, she added, "But I also want to speak to them first." The next morning, at the small local police station, the 3 young men sat across from her in a holding room. They looked nothing like the swaggering bullies from the night before. Claire studied them, barely in their 20s, scared, humiliated, and finally sober enough to understand the gravity of what they'd done. "You broke into my home because you thought I was weak," she began. "Because you mistook silence for fear. You saw someone living quietly and decided she didn't matter." None of them met her eyes. "I used to deal with criminals who thought the same way," she continued softly. "But the truth is, quiet doesn't mean powerless. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones who don't need to shout." Her words hung in the air like a lesson none of them would ever forget. "I'm pressing charges," she said finally, "because you need to face consequences. But I also want you to learn something from this, about respect, about fear, and about the people you underestimate. Months later, the case became small-town legend. The quiet lady in 3B was no longer invisible. But Claire hadn't wanted fame, she wanted peace. And strangely, she found it. The young men completed their sentence and community service. One of them, the ringleader, even knocked on her newly repaired door months later, this time with flowers and an apology that came from the heart. Claire accepted it. Forgiveness didn't erase what had happened, but it allowed healing to begin. As she closed her door that evening, the same door that had once been kicked in by hatred, Claire smiled faintly. She hung her jacket back in the closet, the yellow FBI letters glowing faintly in the lamplight. She didn't need the badge to remind her of her strength anymore. The world would always have its bullies, people who mistake gentleness for weakness, quiet for submission. But Claire knew better now, and so did they. Sometimes the quietest souls carry the loudest strength. And sometimes, it takes a broken door at 2 a.m. for the world to finally see it. Massage. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Behind every gentle silence may live a history of courage, loss, and resilience. Strength doesn't always roar, sometimes, it stands silently in the dark and says, enough.